but America built the biggest one. What it means is George Washington is greater than Pharaoh.
Hi, and welcome to the newest episode of Founding Philosophies, recorded here in Fancy Hill's George Washington Parlor. Our guest today is a Washington and Lee alum, multi-generational, as I'm sure he'll discuss. I have Rodney Mims Cook Jr. joining us, class of 1978, the chairman of the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts. Rodney is traveling all over the country, and yet he's made time over the last few days to actually visit here at Fancy Hill. We had a great gathering with a handful of local supporters, alumni from VMI and WNL, and we've enjoyed going around the community looking at historic homes, talking about historic architecture, and talking about what the subject of this program will be, the importance of American memorialization of monuments, why beauty in physical structures is important for our nation's future. And so with that brief introduction, Rodney, could you just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, about WNL, what you're up to now, just whatever you feel like introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. It's good to be back with you, Kamron. And Fancy Hill looks beautiful. You've done an amazing job, and it's an extraordinary plant. And my hat's off to you.
Thank you. That means a lot coming from you.
Yeah, it's looking good here. And we've had many generations watched the Lee men come through here, and it wasn't required, but my father certainly loved it that I chose to come here, but he kind of raised me on it. And my mother is an old Virginia lady. She's a Sewell from Sewell's Point. We were thrown out of Jamestown because I guess we were too ornery. It's a Navy base now, as you likely know. But she was involved with Colonial Williamsburg and Carlisle Homicide and all of that early thing over there. And so we would always come through Lexington when we would be going to Virginia to Williamsburg to see what she was up to. And the Gillums would always receive us at Belfield, and my sisters and I would run through those gardens.
Yeah.
It's now, of course, a Washington Lee guest house. And it was magical because Miss Gillum was president of the Garden Club of Virginia, and she had the most extraordinary sunken gardens and like 9 or 10 rooms, outdoor rooms that and you could get under the 100-year-old box and little cupboard sorts of openings she had for people our size, with stone benches underneath them. It was magical, and so it was good to go over there yesterday.
Yeah, well, it was nice going around campus. We got to see Mulberry Hill, the headquarters for Kappa Alpha, the Liberty Hall ruins. Got a great tour by archaeologists there.
Thanks very much.
And
the new excavation down the hill a little bit from that was extraordinary.
The steward's house. I as a student had the opportunity to actually do excavations there. My very last class at WNL, my only science class at WNL. If you consider digging up artifact science, then I'm all for it. But it's a really great site. Unfortunately, it doesn't get the appreciation it should within the WNL community. Not much funding for it, but there's some really great individuals that spend a lot of their time preserving it and doing what they can to keep it going for the future whenever the university decides to do more with the Liberty Hall site. But tell us a little more about what it is that you're doing outside of Lexington. Obviously, if people watch the news, your name pops up frequently. You're the chairman of the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts. What is that job like? What does it entail?
So, the president is busy, and he's got a lot of stuff he wants built, and we are already building and more to come. And so, there are elements in the country that people just don't like the president and want to make his beautification of the nation's capital difficult to get done, and it's sadly lacking. And none of the fountains worked, and now they're all working and clean, and it's a really pretty place with new sculpture that's helping to replace the period when we were tearing all of our history down.
Right.
Billions of dollars worth, as if our history didn't happen. And that's something that the Communist Chinese and the Communist Russians, the Soviets, did. You just can't pretend your history didn't happen. You just say this is where we were and this is where we are, and add to it. Right. You don't subtract it.
It seems like one of the initiatives that you're involved with is trying to restore American history to its place of prominence in D.C., beautify the city.
Sure, and the L'Enfant Plan. President Washington hired Pierre Charles L'Enfant to do this masterpiece of a plan for the city. He grew up in Paris, so he had a very keen sense of French style and geometry, and you can look at principal capitals being Paris, Versailles, the palace outline, and now Washington and Delhi, New Delhi. Also, these are all comparable axes and distances from points A to B that are quite remarkable. Truly, ours, I would say, is by far the greatest to date.
Wow.
And it didn't necessarily look like it might end up that way, because in the case of Washington, the Washington Monument was not able to be built due west of the Capitol because of the soil conditions being too infirm for such a 555-foot tall obelisk. And so it was built slightly off-center. Well, that then compelled the Congress to put a train station at the foot of the Capitol for easier convenience for them to get in the office, and the very angular and axial L'Enfant Plan sort of went into a more Olmstedian, city beautiful kind of park with no edges. And then the McMillan Plan, after the Chicago Exposition, it changed everything in America and truly in the world, because we had the assembled talent that did Chicago, which was also the first electrified event.
And that was in the 1890s or sometime?
Yeah, and Atlanta had the second, where I'm from, and we were 1895. So Chicago was probably 1893. I should know the number, but anyway, it was the equivalent of talent in architecture, landscape architecture, painting, sculpture, that we had 100 years earlier in Philadelphia, of all the demigods who created our laws and our documents. It was just a miraculous assembly of talent, and there was a great deal of money to pay for it too. And so we began to rethink the city of Washington, and we doubled the size of it, the mall. We pivoted the entire mall of a L'Enfant Plan on the obelisk. Today, you can't tell that it is not due west because of the genius of these guys who pulled it off. They just pivoted it a little bit and arrange the buildings and the trees to align with it. If you look at a map, you'll see that the mall goes downhill.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, and then of course the reflecting pool and the Lincoln have trees rather than those angular buildings. There are no real buildings down there, and so it softens it even more to trick the eye. It's the largest trick of the eye. Even the Egyptians couldn't do this, or didn't do this. We did. And we use a great Egyptian symbol in the middle of it all, which is what caused it, the great monument to George Washington. And what does that say? What my real job is, whatever real job means, is president of the National Monuments Foundation, based in Georgia. And I was really trying to figure all this out because I used to work for King Charles when he was Prince of Wales in his architecture foundation. And he really taught me, because the angles of the terraces of the Capitol laid out by Washington, who was a Mason. Mm-hmm. And so mathematics is always precise, and the stones didn't align with the obelisk, which drove me crazy as a young person. And so the king is the one who told me, Rodney, it's all center, because they couldn't build it like that, and so the trick of the eye fixed it. And what does that stand for? This giant obelisk, the biggest in the world. Wow. And as we know, Rome took so many of those to Rome from Egypt. Napoleon did the same, but America built the biggest one. What it means is George Washington is greater than Pharaoh. This experiment that we have done here on the Potomac River, and this nation, this republic that we've created, no one has ever done anything like it. And we, given 200 years by Jefferson, and we've exceeded that by 50 years. So as President Reagan said, you're always one generation from losing it if you don't nurture her. So that's what you're doing here. This is an extraordinary gesture that has been made at Washita Lee, and you have a beautiful plan to bring in all of these people to help further the cause of protecting the institution that you're all about and this nation.
I think that's really expertly put, Rodney. And we have behind you on the wall, those watching can see it, there's a little frame case, and there's a silk ribbon from the cornerstone of the Washington Monument, which took decades to complete for a number of reasons. But, they say Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was D.C. It's an ongoing project. And I want to talk more about Washington and Lee and its monuments and sort of how that fits in. But let's stick in D.C. for a little bit longer. What are some of the specific projects that you're working on? I know the two that really come to mind, and you feel free to share as much as you can on these, is the Ballroom to the White House, and then probably my personal favorite project I've seen out of this administration, the Triumphal Arch, or some critics have dubbed it the Arc de Trump. But this Triumphal Arch is this grand piece. It is to go in front of Arlington National Cemetery, which of course has this connection to Robert E. Lee. So you're involved in that, right? I mean, your committee that you're the chair of is the process that's approving these monuments. And could you tell me a little bit about that process, and particularly why you think we need these grand monuments in D.C., continuing this story of D.C. being built and showing the exceptional American leaders here?
Sure. Yeah. Commission of Fine Arts is not a committee; it's a commission, and so it's a presidential appointed group, 7 people, and so it guides the president and the Congress on every single building in the city, except one, the Capitol. We do not have purview of the U.S. Capitol. They tend to their own house, but we do every other building, commercial as well as federal, and parks and statuary and solar panels on tops of houses in Georgetown. So coins of the realm. It's a lot of things. Even some Normandy, cemeteries abroad. Wow. So the Ballroom is a strong focus for us. Now the New York Times has revealed that there's a lot of defense issues needed underneath it, and so that's helped to drive the scale of it. You asked specifically about the arch. Ironically, my foundation proposed to build that arch in that very spot 26 years ago.
Wow! This is the National Monuments Foundation?
Yes. We had thought that the mall, as an ensemble now, with the greatest minds of the last several hundred years, it was pretty much done, and any more crowding of it was going to start to make it look silly. And so we were compelling certainly a national monument to happen at the time of the turn of the century in the millennium, and all these other Western capitals and Eastern capitals were commemorating a Christian date and building big things. And we were more focused on Y2K and whether or not our computers would work. And so we proposed to not only compel Congress to close the mall for large new construction, but to show other magnificent parts of that city what is available outside of the very it's called Area 1, the mall. And so we proposed it for Arlington, 3, Arlington Circle, South Capitol Street, due south of the U.S. Capitol on the river, and Pennsylvania Avenue and the river, the river being the Anacostia. Those were 3 gateways that Pierre L'Enfant, he called himself Peter, but I'll call him Peter, proposed for the nation's capital. And we're the only national capital in the world who doesn't have one still. New York has 3.
Wow.
And it's an economic world capital, but the nation's capital doesn't have one. And so President Trump saw my drawings that the eminent, you should have him on one of your things too, Catesby Lee. Do you know Catesby by any chance?
I don't know.
Brilliant guy, and he's one of the greatest architecture critics of the land. And he told the president, you should look at these old drawings from 26 years ago. The president liked them and initiated the idea of doing it, and then months later brings me back to the Commission of Fine Arts. The Pentagon crash, the plane crashing in the Pentagon, is what threw ours off kilter, a peace monument going up when we were by far at war. And so we, rather than lose all of that intellectual property, His Majesty was very involved in helping us with it. Certainly the entire District of Columbia, it was ready to go, and that disrupted everything. So we moved it to my city, Atlanta, a regional capital, because I knew I could do it. And Bob Stern and Liz Platt-Zyberk and Thomas Gordon Smith and all of the real Leon Creer, the King's architect. We had some of the greatest minds and deans of architecture at Yale, Notre Dame, and UVA, and all these great places who had been the judges for it. And I didn't want to throw all that out. And we hadn't really built a major classical building of such note since the Jefferson Memorial.
Wow. Yeah, it just, to me, this arch being proposed in D.C. really sounds like something that belongs in D.C. And you're saying that we don't already have a arch. I was a classics major, as you may know, at WNL, and really took a lot of courses on the sort of history and culture of the ancient world rather than the linguistic side, and love obelisks, very fascinated with them. And the 2 sort of monuments, I guess 3 you could say, that come to mind are obelisks, arches, these big triumphal arches, and then statues of people. And an arch in D.C., the nation's capital, celebrating America's 250th, really sounds like a great way to show our nation's continuity, both with its own history of 250 years, but even this ancient history. And again, the obelisk saying that Washington is greater than Ramsey, and that this arch shows that, we're greater than the Romans. We've built this new empire that is the best in its time. And I think that really aligns with so many of what some of these founders, the founding architects who designed D.C., people like Jefferson, Washington, who was, of course, instrumental in the capital being moved to D.C. This is the type of grand monumentalization that I think befits the founding generation. And I'm glad that you're working on that. And I'm sure once it goes up, once all these roadblocks get out of the way and we can actually do it, I think Americans will be very glad to see that, and it'll become part of the DC icons that we all recognize so easily.
Certainly. Well, we're also in President Washington's and in President Lee's domain here in Lexington, Virginia, and Robert E. Lee would have lived the rest of his life at Arlington House had the war between the North and the South not occurred. And it's now, of course, the National Cemetery, and his house, his wife's house, sits up on that hill as the ultimate adjustment axis off of the Lincoln Memorial, and also the L'Enfant Plan. And it's a magnificent house based on those temples at Pestum, massive Tuscan order of that big house on the hill, but it's still a mansion house. The importance of that building, though, as the link between Lincoln and Lee, crossing the Potomac in the middle, which was the dividing line between the torn apart nation, is a symbolic binding of the wound. And then, of course, President Kennedy's tomb and the eternal flame is on that axis. You can see the flame at night as you cross the bridge. I thought, in proposing this arch 26 years ago, that it would perfectly frame President Lee's house and essentially become a de facto gateway into Arlington Cemetery, which it will become because it's large. And we finished the Millennium Gate in Atlanta, and we reduced it from the size it would have been there because we're a regional capital and a national capital. But President Trump's building has gone back to the original scale that we had proposed because it's a gigantic space surrounded by trees and no urban context there. It's a garden. And then a national cemetery. And so the big space inside these walls of this arch are going to give the public, and then certainly the families whose sons and daughters are there, a very noble place to go and reflect on all of this, and 10 times the space to showcase it than what we currently have there. But in so doing, it then frames Arlington House and the Lee legacy that I'm called on the commission the ambassador of Georgia, because I'm always and also the ambassador of Washington and Lee, because I'm calling out these things all the time in these meetings. It will add gravitas to Arlington House and what Lee's legacy to the nation truly is, particularly post-war.
Let's talk about that more, because we're in Lexington now. You've been in town for a few days, and we came through with a group of your colleagues, some fellow alumni, went through and we went to the chapel that Robert E. Lee built, that he's buried in, along with pretty much his entire family, and went through there. Our university has had its fair share of controversies and debates regarding Robert E. Lee's legacy, his post-war legacy, as well as his Confederate legacy and his U.S. military career, pre-Civil War legacy. What is your reaction as, really, I mean, you're one of the best people to ask about this, as an alum, as a multi-generational general, as we'd say, as someone who works to preserve and celebrate American history. What has been your response being back in Lexington, seeing the campus, to what you used to think, what you want there to be about Lee? Just how have you responded personally to what we've seen over the last few days?
Sure. Well, the city is looking good. The campus actually is looking good. It looks like there's a lot of work going on. The chapel had some scaffolding on it. I presume maybe just trimming for ivy. I don't know. You can let me. I know you were going to find out and see what's going on. But sadly, of course, the recumbent statue of Lee is walled off. And as you even helped me with a speech here to showcase my father's Epiphany in that very building after 2 years in the South Pacific, and then returning here under Dean Gillam's watchful eye, his great suffering, and PTSD from Okinawa, and so he was allowed to study in there and alone, locked in there, so that no one really knew it, and that he could come back from having trouble concentrating in the hot and cold of the wintertime library with those big windows open and it's 2 degrees outside.
And just so the viewers know, there's a great story, a talk that Rodney did on this in the chapel. We have a video to that. We'll link it in the description below if you want to watch that and sort of get the full story of Rodney Cook Sr., who was class of 47, right?
Yeah. So interrupted by the war, 2 years here, 3 years in the South Pacific, 2 years to finish. Yeah. Of course, he used to take me to Cumberland Island, Georgia, where Light Horse Harry's was buried before being moved here, and Dad loved all of that legacy to the degree that President Lee finally was able to take his own children there to show them their grandfather's resting place.
Right.
And he knew Fort Pulaski. He built that for us in Savannah, just after West Point, and it's a very special place to our family. And it says so in the Lee Chapel that he was at Cumberland Island, Georgia, and moved to Lexington. And so it's very personal. And Dad, he was photographic memory. He ended up being valedictorian of his class, summa cum laude, ODK, all these many things he had, genius IQ, and there's Lee in front of him in these 2 portraits of our founders, and so he read every book that had ever been written about them at the time, and pretty much memorized all of it, and many times spent at Mount Vernon, and I've even had the opportunity to take a wreath into the tomb with the Adams family and Roosevelt's and Eisenhower's for a thing that we're doing with the John Quincy Adams Library in Washington.
It's quite the honor.
Yeah. Stratford, my mother's Virginia background, we would certainly be at Stratford Hall. And Dad had a religious epiphany in this very building. He particularly the post-war examples of both men, but specifically the warrior Lee, because Dad had just come from all of that carnage in the South Pacific and guerrilla warfare. His mates not coming back. He was an officer. His bridge kamikazed. All of his mates eviscerated. He's tethered to the Missouri in Tokyo Bay after the Truman bombs had saved his life. A million guys were expecting to die in the invasion of Japan. And so he returns to bucolic Virginia, and everything is the same. It's not the same. And there he is.
I'm just thinking of his own parallels. I know you're saying in his appreciation of Lee after the war, but even comparing your dad to the Liberty Hall volunteers, these students who were at Washington College before the outbreak of the Civil War and suffer through the bloodiest conflict in American history, and friends, young, brothers that they grew up with in their same town, dying at all these battles, being imprisoned, captured at Gettysburg and imprisoned, and those veterans from that company that survive, many of them come back to finish their studies at Washington College, and then what becomes Washington and Lee. And of course, this is 80 years before your father's story, but that sort of wartime trauma and stress and all that they go through. And so I can imagine in his shoes, I would hope that there would be some sort of comfort in looking to that Civil War period and knowing that there were people before him that underwent a similar sort of adjustment, a very difficult adjustment.
Indeed, they all did. And what resulted from his, and he would also always sit in President Lee's pew. He determined that President Lee's post-war gesture of, no to the Vanderbilt Railroad, no to the New York Life Insurance Company, I'm going to go to Washington College and rebuild the South, and compelling his men and others in the South who would do whatever he told them to do to go rebuild and rebuild your churches and your schools and your cities. And we're over with this. We are rejoining the nation, and let's put this back together. And they did. And so this was very much in contrast to what Dad was experiencing with the guerrilla warfare circumstances of the Japanese in his experience, and how powerful it was to him that this happened only because of the leadership of one man. And we're very close to the Eisenhower family. President Eisenhower compelled, or I should say General Eisenhower compelled Dad to run as a Republican in Georgia, which he was going to do as president. And General Eisenhower had a beautiful portrait of General Lee, President Lee, in the Oval Office. Yeah. And he was one of the most admired men for the majority of our history. It suddenly sidelined him. And Dad had an epiphany because of Lee's example precisely. Washington, too, primarily Lee, to seek out Martin Luther King and figure out a way that we kicked the can since the Constitutional Convention about slavery, and that it needed to be finalized and finished and put to bed once and for all. And he felt very strongly it should come out of Georgia and Atlanta. And entirely because of his reading and study of REL did he do that, and initially sought out Daddy King, Martin Luther King Sr., because Dr. King had, at that point, he was a teenager, and so he hadn't become Dr. King yet, but he became Dr. King, and we all grew up together with his kids, and Dad helped him significantly. Atlanta was the only city in the United States at that time, particularly when Senator Kennedy was, Attorney General Kennedy was killed. Dr. King killed just prior to that, the same year, and the nation erupted, and we did not. And it's because of guys like that who were all very close to each other. They had been used to keeping Atlanta peaceful in that period of time. That entirely came out of Dad's epiphany in the Lee Chapel. And it completely changed his life, and also helped to change the history of our city and our state, because Georgia was very advanced in forwarding that, and I'm trying to do that now. And we've become a true peace center. The city has allowed me to rebuild a peace park our family built in the 19th century. It was called Mims Park, but they have renamed it after my father. And Dr. King's house faces this park, and we've managed to get the National Park Service to purchase it. It's being restored now, and will likely be a destination. Millions of people they expect. And we're building a peace center for Ambassador Andrew Young and Dr. Shin Dae-Young, who are both partnering in this Peace Institute that will have coverage around the world. And, right now they're very focused on the Russia-Ukraine war, North Korea, and Iran. So Dad's epiphany in the Lee Chapel has changed my life, because President Trump now knows that I can do that sort of thing, and he just sent me to Russia a few weeks ago, and we're working on a truce, ceasefire. It is, we hope, Christmas, to see if a treaty can be finalized between Russia and Ukraine now. So say your prayers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the work that you're involved in and that your family's been involved in is just really astonishing. And I know we've had a lot of time to talk about these stories in more detail over the weekend and in other meetings that you and I have had over the years. But it really is a noble work that you and your family have been putting towards this peacemaking, reconciliation, and through all of it, there's this pride in America. I talk with people all the time that America is a country, we have such a problem, and it just seems to be growing among so many factions of our people, really prevalent in my generation, where we're just ashamed of America, ashamed of its history, ashamed of its current state, and people conflate it with the worst evils they can imagine, and just that, it's a very pessimistic, deconstructive view of our heritage, of our 250 years of this nation, this free democratic republic that for 250 years has achieved so much and has become the world superpower in a much shorter time than even that. And I think looking at issues like civil rights, as your father was, being able to look at somebody like Robert E. Lee as a model to help guide them through civil rights. Obviously Lee was not living in the 1960s. He wasn't telling your father, this is what I would do or this is what I wouldn't do. But Lee's example through the life that he lived gave hope to your father, gave a sort of purpose, certainly seemed to shape his character, his moral character at the institution. And so it's a shame that so many people today are so dismissive and critical of the founding generation. We have a plate here with Thomas Jefferson on it, and Jefferson is one of these great American founders who, without him, this country wouldn't be America. I mean, who knows what would have been the fate without Jefferson's hand guiding us for as long as we were fortunate to have him. But so many people just wouldn't want to see Jefferson, wouldn't want to see Jefferson memorialized, certainly wouldn't want a monument to him. And so that same sort of effect has applied to Lee across the country. It seems to be growing against Washington. And it's nice to know that there are people like you who are really trying, with support of the federal government and other entities, groups, really trying to emphasize America's excellence and build monuments to people, celebrate people. So I don't know if the university, if they've had any outreach to you, if they've tried to have any dialogue with you specifically, given all the work you've done to reconcile different communities. I think it would really help the university understand where they are in this present day with Lee's legacy and the future of the campus by talking with you and figuring out, what program could be installed, what could be done to champion our university's own excellence for the benefit.
Yeah, well, they did initially. I helped to craft together some programs that Lasha Lee does where students go out on trips to other parts of the country and learn, and Ambassador Andrew Young was part of that when they came to Atlanta. And of course he held Dr. King when he was assassinated. He's 94, but he's going strong, and he likes W&L, and he, of course, advises Bernice King, who I brought here on the anniversary of her father's assassination when she spoke. And things were moving along, but then they just sort of disappeared. I don't know why, because they went quite well. And so you'd have to ask the administration here. I don't know. But maybe Ken, now that he's here, he might have something to say. The recent president was provost at Williams, where my daughter went, so I've known him for a while. It's good to see that Ken's back, but I'm happy to talk. Send them down, and they came down the last few times, and it went well. It's intellectual hubris to judge people by your time. I mean, it's like condemning cavemen. How ridiculous is this? And you really have to be focused and educated on what were the circumstances of their times, and how did they respond in their time. Who knows what we do now if we continue on this path as to how barbaric people in our future, not too far away, think of us. So it's just anti-intellectual. The same as tearing down statues. You have to interpret where we were and where we are. And it's the same with how people behave, and always look to how they were dealing with circumstances they were dealt, and if they were making good decisions relative to their times or bad ones, and then judge. Lee made really superior decisions based on his time and what he was delivered. He just wanted to farm his beautiful place and not do any of that. And he would look across that mighty river at our capital city and say, there is mischief going on under that dome. He's a military man and not a diplomat. But he ended up being a diplomat. He ended up being one of our greatest diplomats. And his example is one to follow, and it is one that my family has followed.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. One of the things that I'm always impressed with by Lee, and I think Lee picked this up from leaders that he studied, and I think Washington and others are sort of his examples of great leadership, just as they are to us. But they were obviously more recent to him, a generation removed. But Lee wasn't a reactionary. He wasn't hasty in making decisions. In fact, he was so slow to make decisions. He got the not flattering nickname of Granny Lee during the Civil War because he was moving troops too slowly. And that's quite ironic, given later his military tactics and the victories he has, the great victories. But he was called Granny Lee for that. But I think he was wise, and he was he thought through the implications of his actions, and you see that after the war. He's restrained in what he does. He doesn't interview with journalists except on one occasion. He doesn't want to feed a sort of media frenzy to the extent which they had it then, and look at that, how it is now. So I think it is a real loss for anyone, particularly the university, to forego the example that Lee set through his multiple lives lived, both before, during, and after the Civil War. I want to shift a little bit now and talk about this concept of monumentalization, memorialization of American history, and you've traveled all over the world, both in your sort of professional role and now your newer roles that you've been assigned. What have some of these other countries you've gone to taught you about history, the importance of remembering history, any particular literal influences from buildings that you've seen? Surely being a learned world traveler has taught you a lot, given you a lot of wisdom.
Sure, yeah. Worked for the Prince of Wales for 6 years, and in and out of London under his Prince of Wales's Institute of Architecture, which was at Gloucester Gate, and I greatly admire him, and I've thought he was a visionary since everyone thought he was a kook talking to his plants, and now he's known as one of the greatest conservationists, land planners, city planners. He's made $1 billion privately with his land planning through Leon Creer and his new cities, Poundbury in particular. And when Her Majesty died and he became king, he immediately gave all of that to his son. He didn't have to that quickly, but he did. And one generation doing that when he's a busy guy doing other things is quite extraordinary. And so his example is what gave my generation our careers. And he turned everything on its head when he was making a speech at the RIBA at Hampton Court Palace, his territory, about the Sainsbury wing of the National Gallery that would have put a Pompidou Center like Albatross on Trafalgar Square, one of the most beautiful urban places on this planet that's ever been created, and it would have had this massive thing hovering over it with primary colored pipes and wires, and hideous. It would have ruined the place. I think he said something like it would be like a monstrous carbuncle on the beautiful face of a beloved friend. It's probably word for word. And he also added on another occasion that English architects, at least all the Luftwaffe did was leave them rubble. It took the rest of them to make it worse, something like that. True. And so beauty in our buildings, in our urban environments, is a key to a harmonious life together in these places. And if we make them ugly and offensive and lacking in any sort of history and ownership of the public, we will be mad at each other and we will not get along with each other. And that is where all of the mess that started to take place in the early 20th century was my profession. Get them where they live and get them where they work and make them ugly. And for the young people today, thinking this is okay, they're all very intelligent, educated people, the most educated in history of this of our species. And so they need to go back to the history books and look at what the communist systems did in China and in Russia and how many of their people they murdered. And if that's what they want in choosing, which is happening now, then those generations in the future are going to be subject to the same behavior. And get it together. Go learn what happened. And because it sounds so lovely, it's not how you feel, it's how things really are. And as I said earlier, Ronald Reagan said, we are one generation removed from losing all of this magnificent cultural, educational, capitalist system that has been the most generous in the history of our species. It can always be improved. If it's destroyed, it can't be improved.
Right.
So the younger people of today need to hit their history books before they end up in the gulag.
That's a great place to end it, as a pretty wise warning that stretches across centuries of time. This podcast is called Founding Philosophies, and we try to discuss, understand why what the founding generation, the founding fathers thought, why their worldview on so many things is important to emphasize today. And the one thing you can say about pretty much all the founders is they were all incredibly well educated, particularly in the subject of history. And during the Revolution, they knew very well what had happened during the English Civil War, which to them was a little more than 100 years removed. They knew what had happened to past monarchies in Europe, and they'd known what had happened to ancient civilizations, and they'd known the successes and the failures, and that's why they thought they could create something that would last, and they used their knowledge to build something that has lasted us 250 years and going. And so architecture is a critical piece to that. That's why they design these beautiful grand buildings, and when they put up buildings that weren't to their liking or monuments that weren't to their liking, they'd have them removed and build a better one that was more fitting and becoming of the sentiments they tried to express. And there's really no founding father that was a stronger advocate of that than Henry Lee, who in Congress petitioned largely for what would become the Washington Monument. It would take decades to get there, but really wanted this memorialization to Washington, wanted memorializations to Nathaniel Greene. When the Marquis de Lafayette came, the entire country unified together to build monuments to Bunker Hill and to award the Marquis all of these gifts of appreciation and to build structures. There's so many structures that go up in that period that are commemorative, and many of which are still standing today. So the work that you're doing, Rodney, really seems in line with what the founders intended, and I think it'll do our country well to serve us through generations to come. So just want to thank you for that work and all the people that work with you and advise you and that you have an impact on. And of course, as usual, thanking our listeners for tuning into this program. We've got more of these planned this semester, and we appreciate your support. And as always, go Generals.